Well, what's that smell? People from different parts of Gauteng have reported a smell of bad air, with some even complaining about headaches. Now, the cloud is believed to be pollution emanating from Mpumalanga. Rolf Berger from the Northwest University's Climatology and Pollution Research Group joining us this morning to explain what is going on there. Doc, a very good morning to you. Thank you so much for your time. So, we've been hearing, this is not unusual for this time of year, but some Joburgers seem to be a bit panicked about it. What is it that we are actually smelling at the moment?
Well, we've had unusually wet weather, and that normally clears the skies. And then we've got the low pressure system in the Mozambique Channel causing all the rain in the northern parts of the country. And that sets up perfect circulation patterns that moves the pollution over the Highveld and the Vaal areas over Gauteng, where we normally upwind from the pollution sources. Now we smack bang downwind, and that's causing some people to smell things that they normally don't smell. However, our noses are very sensitive, and we smell some of these pollutants at very low concentrations. You can in real time see the monitoring data on the government websites, and I've been looking at that, and although you can see a slight increase, it's still far better than other times of year, like in winter, which is our worst time for pollution. So I wouldn't say this is a huge thing to worry about, although air pollution in general is definitely something we should all be worried about.
But how dangerous is this? Because I've seen some warnings circulating this morning, especially for the elderly, those who suffer with asthma, and young children as well. Does it pose any sort of immediate danger, especially if it's not going to go on for much longer?
No. This episode, I would say, is not something to worry about for those groups. But as I mentioned before, the things that has the biggest impact on health and for those groups of people that you mentioned is actually below our sensory system. So it's typically small particulate matter, so small that we can't see it, and then also ozone. And the times of year where this is most prevalent is during winter times, when we have a very stable environment and many people use solid fuels to heat their homes. So this is a definite concern, and we estimate it to be 3 to 4% of GDP, the health cost of these pollutions. And we don't even account for indoor air pollution, which is sometimes even a bigger problem. So people should be worried about this, but not the smells that they experience at the moment.
All right, Rolf, so just for clarity and for all the conspiracy theorists out there, I mean, we hear that one of the is that it comes from the mines. Others say there's a bit of a dump site somewhere in Centurion, and then others say, you know, it's sort of from industry, and like you say, carried by the winds as well. So in essence, what you're saying is that this is just pollution that is basically being caused by us, and it gets carried by the wind at this time of year? Or is there a particular culprit that we can pinpoint?
Well, it is industry as a whole, and industry is economic development. So this issue is intrinsically tied to problems like climate change, economic development, energy. I'm sure everybody saw NASA just gave Eskom a 15% increase in costs. Now, this directly ties to us. If we want Eskom to be cleaner, it will mean hundreds of billions of rands of technology that they'll have to invest into cleaner control. So that will then have an impact on us. So the issues of air pollution impacts on every one of us. Of course, the impacts on health are disproportionately borne by the people in low-income areas where pollution is the worst. But our noses are typically, in this time of year, those are a nuisance, and it's also likely to the wet weather when all these the waste areas are wet from all the rain. We smell more of that, and it's not so much a health concern as it is a nuisance.
And has this possibly been made worse or more noticeable this year by the recent weather we've had as well? If we look at Tropical Storm Eloise as well, do we think that might have something to do with it as well? Why we're particularly...
No, definitely. Yeah. So while we do have these episodes every now and then, this one has been prolonged for quite a few days, so this is a little bit unusual. And of course, this whole year's weather is a little bit unusual. We have seen a very strong La Nina Also likely related to changes in climate. We haven't seen so many La Niñas as we do, and La Niñas are associated with wetter weather, which cleans the atmosphere, and then when it's clean like this, we are acutely aware of changes in pollution levels. And so I think it all plays together to this perfect storm. Of course, like I say, I'm happy that people are being made aware of air pollution, and we should keep our eyes on this problem because it affects us all.
And you did say that at the moment, Roelof, that it's nothing that we should worry about too much in terms of health hazards, but we know ongoing pollution, yes, does pose a particular risk. At what point, if this carries on, should we be worried about our health? Should we maybe just be going to sort of check what levels are in our bodies, especially those who are vulnerable and susceptible to certain illnesses?
So remember, these pollution that we're smelling comes from industries that's sometimes hundreds of kilometers away from Gauteng. So when the pollution arrives here, it's at fairly low concentrations. So theoretically, we can attribute a health effect to it. But in practice, the things that's going on around you, maybe smaller industries that's in your neighborhood, or maybe there's no service delivery and people are burning waste, or there's dirt roads around you, or there's no vegetation cover and there's wind-blown dust. Those things will have a much greater health impact. And that is things that people should be worried about, especially indoor pollution, which is something that you can do something about. So yes, people should be worried about pollution, but I don't think this event is something that we should be concerned about in terms of its health effects.
In terms of those where you say it's coming from a sort of big industry, what about the communities that live closer to them? Even though this may not be significant for those of us who live a little further away, you've been studying this for a long time, keeping your eye on it. Are there particularly vulnerable communities, even when this happens at such a low grade?
So we're busy with quite a few studies, and we have, for example, one study in Darvel and near Ermelo, where we make measurements in the more traditional urban areas, and then we compare that to the townships. And even in close proximity to large industries and power stations, you'll find that in the towns where the population density is lower, people's general economic situation is better, air quality levels are fairly good and doesn't pose such a big threat to health. But just moving 3-4 kilometers away into the townships, it drastically changes. So the problem of air pollution, as I said before, is tied to economics. And if we can find solutions for improving the general economic conditions of the poor in South Africa, we will also be addressing the problem of air pollution. And the second very inconvenient link is to climate change. Of course, our reliance on fossil fuels and our use of these as energy sources has both impacts on our economy, on air pollution and climate.
All right, so nothing to panic about just yet, but of course there are long-term concerns, as we heard from Dr. Roelof Burger there, about that funny smell in the air at the moment. Still on the way.